come in. We're going to bring in Tim Quilty, who got kicked out of Parliament, and in he comes. Tim, welcome to the show. But before we go, can I see your vaccine passport first, please?
Sadly, no.
Sadly?
I've been telling people I am vaccinated. I got my 2 shots. I'm not an anti-vaxxer or vaccine hesitant. I'm pro-vaccine, but what I am for is pro consent. I refuse to be part of any movement that's going to coerce people into medical treatment. So while I have my vaccine shots, I'm not going to show it to anyone, and we'll fight this off together.
Were you surprised that it came to this?
Very surprised.
Had the gall to kick you out of Parliament?
It's astounding to trample all over hundreds of years of precedent in the Westminster parliamentary system. We haven't seen this since 1648, when Cromwell became dictator and purged the Parliament. It's just extraordinary. MPs have been kicked.
Is that a fact? 1648 since the last time that happened?
Well, in a Westminster democracy, I believe.
The English Revolution.
We've seen MPs get kicked out for doing bad things, breaking laws, being convicted of crimes, but for refusing a medical treatment, it's just unprecedented, really.
And did they use force? If you've threatened to go, were they going to use the bailiff or whoever they use?
No, we do have the usher of the Black Rod, I think they're called, who's technically, that's her job to use. The Black Rod, it's a mace, it's a weapon. So technically, she's in charge of policing the Parliament, keeping out strangers and keeping MPs in line. But
there's a few links to Cromwell there, isn't there? The mace, there's a few links to Cromwell.
Yep. So a mace that no one's ever used in 500
since 1648.
Just her luck, she's got to use it.
But they weren't quite that foolish, so they made it. The deadline for submitting the papers was the Parliament finished on Thursday night at Friday morning, about 12:30 in the morning. The deadline for submitting the certificates was that Friday night, and come this morning, they turned off our accesses. So
you couldn't get in.
So now we can't get into the Parliament.
Can't get in, right?
You can't.
Is that how you found out? You tried to use your pass and you couldn't get in?
No, I got an email. We were expecting it. Yep. I'm up in Wodonga, so it's a 3.5 hour trip for me every time I want to go to the Parliament. Anyway, so I won't find out till next week when the Parliament sits again.
Now, you said that we'll beat this together. Do you believe that? Will we beat this together?
Well, maybe that was a little bit of wishful thinking there. I think it'll end. It'll crumble. Not necessarily because we fight it, but just because it's really hard to enforce.
Will he get his increase in the state of emergency? More importantly, will he get to increase his state of emergency before it crumbles? Because that's the really important point, isn't it?
Right. So the state of emergency ends, I think it's the 15th of December. Yep. And they have no power to extend it currently. Yes. Originally, we had 6 months of state of emergency powers, and they passed an emergency extension to that, and then they passed another emergency extension to that. That's expiring in December 15. So if they want more emergency powers, they're going to have to push another bill through Parliament.
I thought that I was under the impression that that's what he was trying to do. So that's why he's
rid of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
making it easy to pass that legislation.
It's all a big secret what they're up to. They haven't told anyone. There's a couple of hints that dribbled out that they do have some secret legislation being prepared, but no one knows the details are. No one knows whether they're going to still want the powers to lock everyone down or just to quarantine people or what's going on. The optimist in me says this whole push with the mandates is a last-ditch push to try and get as many people vaccinated as possible before 15th of December when they let it go. The pessimist in me says, nah, that's Dan. Dan doesn't like letting go of power. So,
well, that seems pretty evident by the way he's talking. I don't see him frightened at all. Now, before we go on, I have to admit I'm in the art world and I'm someone that's literally had nothing to do with Parliament until they dragged me in to vote, but that's changed in this period. So can you explain to me and all the other dumbards out there, what is the difference between a Liberal Democrat and just a Liberal?
All right. So the Liberal
I love that
Democrats,
laugh. Don't you
Budget.
love that little laugh? I love it. Yeah, go ahead.
So the Lib Dems are we're a party that I've sometimes described in the past. I've sort of described it as we have the economic policies that the Liberal Party pretends they believe in, and also some of the social policies from the left side. For example, so things like legalizing various drugs, not necessarily being tough on crime. I don't want to say soft on crime, but not the law and order campaign you might get out of the social conservatives. More about individual choice and freedom in social policy, and also individual choice and freedom in economic policy. So the government should make less rules for every part of our life. Out of your wallet and out of your bedroom is another line. The Liberal Party is a mix of people who claim to be social liberals but also social conservatives, and claim to believe in economic freedom. But we've seen very, very little of that in the last 20 years out of the Liberal Party anywhere in this country.
And
they're more just a big mix.
Now.
Sorry?
They're very quiet now.
They were. It was interesting during the debate to throw us out of Parliament. A bunch of Liberals got up and said, "This is really terrible," but we're voting for it anyway. Some of them said, "Oh, it's not so bad. We had vaccine mandates back in 1850, so it's not the first time we've done it, so everything's fine." Others had their arms twisted to vote for it, and they were not happy, but they all went along and voted for it.
All of them.
But in the lower house, all but one Liberal MP who didn't, and who's got kicked out, and in the upper house, all the Libs except one, Bernie Finn, who somehow got lost on the way to the chamber. So he didn't actually vote against
Catholic
it.
got lost on the way to the chamber.
Yeah. Well, it's happened before. We've had a couple of Libs stuck in the lift before.
Tim, some people would argue that the mess we find ourselves in today is a direct result of the liberalism which you espouse. So the reason why we don't have a good industry anymore in Australia is because of economic liberalism, the freedom of choice around everything, the proliferation of pornography, because that's a liberal choice. Why shouldn't we be able to choose those things? A lot of people would argue that's the mess that's resulted in the mess we're in today. What would you say to that?
So I don't really agree with any of that. I'm not necessarily a super liberal, if you like, or in the American term, myself. In my life, a lot of my beliefs are personally a little bit conservative, but the difference is we just don't think anyone has the right to tell anyone else how to live their life. I think the vast majority of our mess that we have now is a direct result of governments trying to tell people how to live. And while we might have slacked off a little bit on the things that we're banning, so pornography might be more free and gay rights more frequent. We've still jacked up on the whole bunch of things you can get cancelled for and kicked out of stuff. So there's been no real change about the social conservative forces. Just what they're policing has changed a little bit. On the economics, yeah, sure, we did. We did see a loss of a lot of industry in Australia, but in the situation we built with this little Fortress Australia, high wages, very, very expensive products, a lot of people, the economic liberalism that did see some industries leave Australia also led to a massive flood of cheap goods and economic development, and people's
at what cost
got
though?
better.
At what cost? Yeah,
and it was a cost.
I mean, materially they got better, no doubt about it. Yeah.
I think some of the issue was government stuffing up the way they managed it, and deliberately pushing industries out of the country. We probably should have had wages not rise so hard and fast, and we probably should have had a little bit more freedom in the labour market. So it's not just cost of labour, but it's also all the rules around it. And you'll see it
Howard tried to do that with work choices, didn't he? And he didn't go so well.
To some extent, he tried to free it up, and that would have saved some industry, I think. I don't want to go into bat for any Liberal Party policy.
No, we're just having a robust debate. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just watching.
But the actual cost of employing someone is not just their wages. There are all the on costs, and there's all the compliance costs. And all these layers and layers of bureaucracy that have to be put in place.
Yep.
We're building something on the road now. You need to employ these people to stand around with the signs, other people to stand around with radios, people to sit in their trucks. Everyone's got to take a break every 10 minutes.
Well, the real imposition now is going to become COVID marshals, isn't it? Because businesses are going to have COVID marshals, because who's going to police who's got the passport and who hasn't got the passport? That cost is going to be borne by business, which would be borne by the consumer ultimately, I would imagine, yeah?
Just one more cost added to doing business. In the
Another layer of bureaucracy as well.
Yeah. I feel it's going to buckle because business will stop enforcing it after a little while.
Well, that's what happened today. I interviewed a woman who runs a new age shop, but she has this big health. It's in Caulfield. She has this big health retreat as well. She's a very successful entrepreneur, and basically she's not allowed on her premises now because she's not vaccinated. And she was talking about all the people she's lost, and how the trained people she's lost. Now she's got 2. Now if she wants to open, she has to train them to police the customers. And she said it's just an absolute unworkable nightmare, and it's not productive for business. It's not a business environment. I mean, if you've got a cafe, a farm is different. But say you had a cafe in Wodonga, you want everybody that wants to come in to make money. If you're going to exclude 30% and then pay somebody to stand at the door to make sure that 30% don't come in, it's just nuts. I just don't see how it makes any economic sense. I don't know.
It's not great for the goodwill, is there?
I don't see why the Liberals would vote for that, because it certainly goes against everything the Liberal Party stands for.
Yeah. The Liberals were just scared of being labelled by the government as anti-vaxxers, and they would
caught on the wrong side of vaccination. Yeah. Vaccination,
and they were just terrified at the thought they'd be called bad names, and were willing to throw principles to the air. But that's not unusual for the Liberal Party. They don't.
But I heard because there's only a rump of the Liberal Party left in the Parliament, the biggest ever defeat, I think, in the history of state elections. Now, I heard that they actually want to keep Dan as best they can in the leadership of the Labor Party, because they think that's their best chance of clawing back some of the vote that they lost in the last election. What would you say to that, Tim?
We've certainly heard those kinds of discussions around the place. I think if Labor did tip Dan out and elect someone else, that might give them a little bump. But it's hard to say, because what's happened with the whole COVID lockdowns and everything else is there's been a real shift in voter behaviour. A bunch of rusted-on Labor voters have just walked away from the party, and they're never coming back.
So it could be really good for the Liberal Democrats. It could be a great time for you guys, couldn't
it? And there's a bunch of Liberals who have thought Dan's done a great job. All the people we call them the laptop class, all these people who work from home, and lockdown hasn't been that much of an issue for them. I think it's all gone really well. Whereas the manual workers, small business people, have been absolutely crushed and destroyed. So the Libs have lost votes to Labor. Labor have lost votes to someone else, and the Lib Dems have been picking up people from everywhere. They've picked up a lot of Labor voters, ex-Labor voters, a lot of ex-Greens even.
So there's only 2 of you though in the House at the moment, in the upper house, yeah.
Yeah, at the moment, but
is there any in the lower house?
No.
Are you going to run? Are you going to run for the lower house next time?
Well, absolutely. So the federal election is coming up first, and that's our focus right now. We're going to run candidates in a lot of lower house seats as well as Senate teams. I doubt we'll win lower house seats. It seems unlikely that we'll break those numbers.
We'd increase your representation in the upper house.
I'd be unaware. I actually shared one of your speeches on the Cafe Lockdown site, and the last time I checked, it had I think it had like 400,000 views. So I'm not sure the people in Parliament, or maybe they're completely out of touch with the electorate. I mean, I know we lean this way with pro-choice and against segregation, and we do get the odd hater in, but at the moment we're just getting enormous support. Most of our people who watch this show are based in Victoria, and we're reaching 1.4 million a month, and that's just me and Damien and a few webcams and dodgy computer. So I actually think they might truly be out of touch with the electorate.
So I think there's no doubt that especially Labor left are very out of touch, and they only ever move in their own bubble of their own supporters, and they literally don't even know there's a problem going on for many of them. not true for Dan Andrews. Dan Andrews is spending millions and millions of dollars on polling every week. He's very aware of every time there's a shift in the opinion of the public, which we saw when they closed the parks in Melbourne. They said kids can't play, and he took a 20% hit in 1 week in his opinion, his popularity, and suddenly they reversed that. And we've seen it again today, yesterday and today, with the bringing forward the roadmap for the letting us out of lockdown and letting Melbourne out on Thursday night.
What do you think that decision was based around, Tim?
I think it was that people saw Sydney and New South Wales being let go, and Dan saying we're not going to do that, and there was a popular sentiment going, "What the hell?" or something more harsh than that. And
Tim, do you find it as confusing as Do you find it's confusing as we do that, like this time last year when there was like 20, 30 maybe cases in the community where it was really important that we maintain a hard lockdown. Now there's, at times there's been over 2,000 more cases than any other time in Melbourne's history with dealing with this pandemic. Suddenly, no, we're doing really well when it's okay to let everybody out.
Well, first of all, you just got to know that everything that Andrew says is spin and market-tested comments. No, there's no science behind this at all. Or it's probably wrong to say there's no science behind it, but every decision that's made has been signed off by Dan, based on his polling research. What the people will accept, what they won't. It is a different situation. They had, last year they managed to get to COVID zero with lockdowns, and they thought they would keep that going. And this time they've lost lost control of it. So they've got to keep spinning the story, even when it's out of control. They've got to spin the story that they're in control.
Well, how does that spin? It doesn't make sense. Sorry.
Well, we saw that there was $110 million. Someone said to me that's what they're spending on their marketing and their spin a year. I mean, you're in Parliament. What would $110 million buy us in hospitals and stuff like that? Or anything else.
Less than you think. It wouldn't buy a hospital.
I don't buy a few beds, though. Buy a few beds.
It would certainly buy beds. Buy some
few ICU beds.
Buy some training.
And how much are we spending on these? But how much are we spending on these police officers that are controlling the city to make sure the freedom protesters, from that Bearcat to 3 bus loads full of police officers, you got them all in these 6 RAVs. They're all driving around, jumping on anyone who dares to hold up a sign wanting freedom. How much are they costing us?
We do not know a fortune. We think the police have well and truly blown through their budgets, and they're really keen to stop enforcing protests because they run out of money to pay for it. But they just blown through a huge amount of cash there. They've just blown through cash. Forget the budget ever being in balance or paying off our debts anymore. I think, and this is true for Australia as a whole. We've just run up debts, wartime debt, the equivalent to the Second World War debts in the last 18 months, without any intention to ever pay it back.
Well, it's insane because they've even come out today, and this might be a federal thing, I'm not quite sure, I imagine it is, if there's any adverse reactions that can be proved to the jab, so they're even accepting that to some extent, there's a $5,000 limit payment to each individual that can prove that's the case. Again, this is taxpayers' money. There's just more money. It always makes me think that they're trying to collapse the system and enforce this great global reset. Is that something you think may be happening?
I wouldn't go that far. I don't think there's a massive conspiracy there. It's just government doing what government does, and every time you give government money and power, then they use it. They use their money to employ more people. They use the power to get more powers, keep growing bigger and bigger. It's a natural force. You don't have to invent a conspiracy to explain it. It's just
the same old story, is it? Labor get in, they spend large, they spend with absolute largesse, just open checkbook, and then the Liberals come in and sort of tighten everything up. Is that basically what we're stuck at?
That's been the course in the past, but I think we've now reached the point where the Libs are not interested in
that's true.
Anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, we saw with the federal Liberal government that they've done nothing to cut back on spending, and I think state Liberal governments have got no appetite for it either.
So how's correction going to come, Tim? How is correction going to come?
Well, there's 2 options. either governments default on the debts eventually when they can't afford to pay them, or they run massive inflation and let the debts erode away along with everyone else's cash savings. I think the inflation is far more likely for us. I personally expect inflation to go through the roof in the next year, 2 years, 5 years. We were looking at 20% inflation.
So that'll put pressure on interest rates as well.
Yep. But having said that, but if they put interest rates too high, the government can't pay its debt back, so they're trapped there as well. Having said that, I've been predicting inflation since 2008 and the GFC. It hasn't happened yet, so I may not know what I'm talking about.
You're muted, Michael.
Maybe you should contact Rothschilds and ask them. Maybe they could give you an inside thing.
No, he's not into conspiracies, mate. He's not into them.
Just to show you some of the... Yeah, no.
We shouldn't have got him on.
This is...
That's disappointing, Tim.
This is here. Look, this is coming in. Catherine Cummings is trying to come in. Oh, she's almost here. To trick or treat in New South Wales, any 16-plus kid will need to provide evidence they're fully vaccinated or have a medical exemption. So that's for Halloween coming up. You know? It's and so you're going trick or treat, and the people are going to go, "Can I see your passport?"
Suburbs going to need to get COVID marshals.
Maybe you get a lolly.
Maybe
you get a lolly, or maybe you get arrested. You know, do you sense, like, even in the country of Wodonga, are they more relaxed out there with it? Because we've heard some country towns. We had a guy on here from Bairnsdale who ended up in hospital because the police thought he was a protester. He wasn't, and he got a few ribs broken and a hand. Are you there, Catherine?
She's got an interesting avatar in her stead.
And there's but what is it like in Wodonga? Are they more relaxed with it? Are the stores open? Is everything like? Would you not know that, you know, COVID was even around, or are they? Do they have the same level of fear that seems to be intoxicating the country?
I think there's a fair amount of fear here. We've gone through up until now the whole crisis without cases of COVID, but there have now been some in Albury and a couple in Wodonga as well in the last couple of weeks, and the community has been all scared by COVID. There's a lot of fear out there. I have no doubt about that.
You don't even need cases, though. Do look at Michael Gunner. He's taken it to another level, the Chief Minister in the Northern Territory. He's taken it to the next level. People are going to be fined $5,000 if they dare to turn up at work and they're unvaccinated.
You get $5,000 if you commit a crime and you don't wear your mask.
Yes. If you don't wear your mask and you're a burglar or something, B&E, you get an extra $5,000. Put on top. The bureaucracy's out of control. It's just allowed to just issue tickets for whatever it wants, whenever it wants.
If you actually rob a bank with a mask, the judge will go, well, because you wore a mask, we're not going to charge you the extra $5,000.
Yeah, not as bad.
A few months, just a funny story. A few months ago, I had a guy came into my office in Wodonga, furious that he went to the bank without wearing a mask and they wouldn't let him in. And I couldn't stop laughing. I shouldn't have been laughing, but it's a state of events where you can't go to the bank unless you're wearing a mask.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. There's all these things that are going insane. You know, from I told you today, I've been interviewing people coming up. There was a single mum, a real estate agent, and she's now unemployed. She did an interview in the car because she didn't want her 2 kids to know she was unemployed. But she just wants what you said, pro-choice. She's defending her freedom not to take the thing. And today they interviewed another nurse, and there's a vet nurse, and I have all these people contacting me, nurses, and not just nurses, but across the board, from mechanics to all sorts of things, going, I'm unemployed. What do I do? I've got a family of Croatian. They're all in the building trade. They're all sitting at home now. I mean, literally 2 months ago or 3 months ago, even in COVID, they were earning thousands a week between them. Now they're just wondering about packing up and going back to Croatia. And all these entrepreneurs that I've been interviewing, they're saying, why set up a business? It's just going to be crushed down. And to me, if we're going to get out of this mess and have a chance of paying these bills off, we need the entrepreneurs to be driving us forward and generating stuff. Here we go. Let's see if she's come in. Hi, Catherine. How you going? That's your window. It's a bit black.
Yeah, hello. How are you?
It's
It's
good.
very dark, isn't it? I'm on my mobile.
And now you're upside
Hopefully.
down.
Now I'm upside
Looks
down.
like your leg or something. Yeah, but I'll just, from your point of view as a libertarian, really, there's how can you see the economic sense in any of this? That's what everyone's talking to me. No one can understand why the economics of our country. I mean, we seem to be just destroying it. I saw an article that said 60% of businesses are facing ruin.
Yeah, so none of it makes any sense. It's so again, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think they panicked and then spent all this money and locked all these things down, and it worked. And their popularity figures went through the roof, where everyone got to work at home with the laptop classes who were really happy with work from home, no more commute. They got all their money, and they even got pay rises if they were public service, and the government was protecting them. And it's always a very, very popular message of the government to say, "I'll keep you safe," and so they just ran with it. But we just got stranded on the wrong side of this lockdown, screw up with the vaccine rollouts, and we've blown all this money. We've got nothing to show for it. And look, the job of government is, if you want to break it right down to, is saying what's worth spending money on and what isn't. And they have all these rules of thumbs. And they say, a life is worth $4 million or $10 million, or whatever, $8 million. They have all these different metrics in different situations. So it's worth spending money to fix this road, because we'll save. So $100 million on this road will save 5 lives, or whatever. And this is the job of government at the end of the day, is to make these judgments saying that's too much money to spend. We're not going to fund that medical treatment because it's too expensive per person. When COVID came along, they just threw all that out the window and said, we'll just spend, for not that much value, in terms of lives saved.
They were unaccountable, weren't they? They were held unaccountable by any effective opposition, because the state of emergency allowed them to just do whatever they wanted.
They could dismiss the parliament and just spend money as they saw fit, and no checks, no balances. And here we are. We've got this massive debt that's never going to get paid back, and not much to show for it.
I wanted to wait until Catherine came in because I wanted. Sorry, Michael.
I think she's grating carrots. She's slowly coming out of the darkness. Almost.
He keeps promising, but not delivering.
It's so from what we're saying. So out here, outside of Parliament, beyond all the policemen on horses and all the stormtroopers, we here are thinking, okay, this is a big plan. This is the end of times. That's what people really think. People are really concerned. But you're saying that in Parliament, it's just a load of people mad crazy for power who've just basically lost it, and they're surrounded by a bunch of cowards who are just basically letting it all run riot, and we're just going down Melbourne's most livable city, going down the gurgler just because, insanity, really.
It is a collective insanity, and no, it's not just the government; it's in the people too. We've just gone mad.
It is. It's mad.
I used to.
Damien, would you tell that story? Or maybe no, that wasn't just someone else told me. Someone's had a baby, and the grandparents are delivering food, but they won't visit the baby.
Yeah, and that was me. That was me.
That was you.
Story.
Yeah.
It was it was a friend of mine. Yeah. It was his godparents.
And it's their first godchild, and they won't visit it because they're scared because they're not vaxxed. And
they will bring food to the front door, but they wouldn't come in because the mother and father and the newborn, of course, are unvaxxed. It's just so cruel. It's just the cruelty heaped upon cruelty. And as my friend explained to me, even under Dan's scenario on Thursday, when we open up, they would be allowed to come in and see him, even according to Dan's own, sociopathic rules. They still wouldn't do it.
Just incredible.
He ends up having a stand-up fight with his father-in-law instead of celebrating the birth of his first daughter. I mean,
and when I called your party when we were seeing if we could get you on, Catherine, are you okay there? Silence. When we see if you were
Clearly not.
if you were coming on, the guy I was speaking to, I think his name is Ash or someone, was laughing with me saying that the left don't like us using the word apartheid, they don't like us using the word segregation, they don't like using the word discrimination. And we're going, okay, well, what word do you want us to use to declare the where we're going? What is the word that we can use? Because it's all those three things. I mean, it's insane. You're turning people against people. Dan is willing it on. That's what he said today. Turn against the unvaccinated. I mean, this is...
That's his source of power.
This is crazy shit.
And you know, it's incredible. It's incredible that the bureaucracy of government can get so big that he can simply rule by appeasing those people and appealing to those people and forget to hell with the rest of the community. That actually their concerns do not matter. He actually said at one point, I cannot understand why these people are protesting. What's wrong with them? I mean, such a tin ear. But the bureaucracy is so big, that's almost enough to keep him in power.
Well, they've built these a lot, and that's it's always been the purpose of government is to take the money and then feed it out to their supporters. And that's, for thousands of years, that's how governments worked. They build a client base with money. It's become much more elaborate as societies got wealthier and more money got taken in taxes. They could build these massive bureaucracies that do very little. And for the employed client, these are population that depend on the government for their money now. So it's not just the unemployed, it's all the public servants and this is probably why the Liberal Party's abandoned the idea of balancing budgets and tax cuts, because they know they'll lose the public servants if they do that, and they need that voting base as well.
Yeah.
So the only thing that matters is being elected now, so they've abandoned all principle.
Are you frightened that he'd get back in with a greater majority?
I find it hard to imagine there are enough people who are so angry in Victoria, and including traditional Labor voters, that I think they will lose seats. But my gut feel is that the Labor government will be re-elected, just not with the thumping majority they had last time.
They got a huge majority, yeah.
Really hard to lose from that situation.
Can I say, Michael and I heard Neil Angus, the Liberal member for Forest Hill. We heard his speech on the 14th to the lower house. I know you're in the upper house, but you'd be aware of it. I thought his speech was fantastic. It was really heartening. He really took the fight from the opposition to the government and made a lot of points that I would have liked to have made myself. I could agree with most of what he said, not necessarily all of it, but it really heartened me. Were you aware of that speech? And what effect did that have in the parliament? Because it feels like that's been lacking. I haven't seen anyone doing it. And if anything, I would have thought he was a bit late. Could have he done it 2 months ago when we were on that precipice already? But he sort of did it the day before we would all lose our jobs if we weren't jabbed.
Well, and that was in because he's the one that got thrown out of the parliament for not having the vaccines.
Okay.
So
it's personal.
So he obviously supports that position and everything, but he in the lower house, he was the only person to speak of all the MPs in the lower house, speak against it or vote against it. The rest of them all marched in lockstep: Liberal, Labor, Greens, Independents.
I heard he actually got into trouble with the Liberals. I thought the Liberals were pretty displeased with him because he went against party lines.
He'll probably lose his pre-selection over it, I would think.
With that, the people might.
Are they aware that great evil can happen when good people do nothing? I mean, these cliches that we've grown up listening to are now never more relevant. I mean, I've got a priest coming on Wednesday night, and I've been talking to the church. We just wanted to hear why the churches were closed, how the churches felt about being closed. I wanted to find out that a lot of the priests are dead against it, but the archbishop silenced them. They actually, so they can get defrocked if they go against this. We've heard now that, I'm not sure, but actually I won't say it until I am sure, but there's, and so we hear there's great divisions in the police, there's great divisions in the church, and there's just silence everywhere. In fact, the only place anyone seems to be having any debates are on shows like these podcast shows, and we get warned constantly. They'll get you, like you're living in some sort of Gestapo state. But that's what we get told all the time. Oh, that's it. We had Tofu. I don't know, Tofu? Tofu on here Monday. Last Monday, and he's going, oh, yeah, there's no conspiracy. And the next day he gets arrested for incitement. And you're literally thinking, holy crap. And I don't know. I'm just wondering if these things can start not on a plan, but just like a ball rolling down a hill, no one's stopping the ball, and suddenly we end up somewhere really evil. We didn't mean to, but it's just because good people didn't stand up and go, no, this is
it's like fascism is an addiction to power. Ultimately, it's an addiction to power. You can't get enough. It can never be sated. All you can do is go further and further, more and more and more.
Yep. And you can clearly see that in Andrews and his response to the pandemic. He's loved having these emergency powers. I was saying to someone asked me a question, what have you changed your views on recently? And there were a lot of things about a lot of different things, but I said, well, I was wrong about. I thought the Victorian government would take those emergency powers, use them sensibly for a few weeks to flatten the curve, and we'd all be back to normal life. We didn't. So there was debate about it in the Parliament, and we didn't vote against it. It wasn't that we had a chance to vote it, stop the things anyway, but we stood up and said, well, we don't like these emergency powers, but we don't know what's really happening with the virus. It was back in March when everyone was panicking and they were talking about bodies on the streets all through China and so on.
Yes,
We don't know what's happening, so we're not the government. We won't jump up and down about this. Now, a few months down the track, and I was going, what the hell?
So, Tim, were those bodies on the street you talk about in China and the houses being welded up and all that, was that a psychological operation from China, or was that something that was just irresponsibly picked up by the media because they knew it would sell?
I have no massive insight into it. I don't know what the facts are. I think China was doing propaganda to themselves, to their own population, about how they're in control of it and so on. The bodies on the street stuff was probably never true at all. They had a lot of deaths. With a lot of people in China to die, so of course they had a lot of deaths. But the welding up the doors with the government showing we're in control, we're in charge, we'll take control of this. And the Western media loves the panic, so they ran with it, and everyone lost their collective marbles over it, and we haven't really got them back again yet.
You're muted, Michael.
How did you feel when you saw the footage of the shooting at the shrine?
I'm appalled. And I wasn't reflectively anti-police. I kind of thought that was the thing for the Greens to do, and I'm not coming from what was originally a conservative background. I've never been anti-police until now, but just over the last 9 months or 12 months, when watching the police handle the protests, I've lost all respect for the Vic Pol and the police. And if you go through my speeches in Parliament over the last few months, I've made a number of attacks on them. It's just appalling. And the attack on the shrine is incredible. And then the spin they were going about all these evil protesters desecrating the shrine, and the wonderful police charging with tear gas and firing on people to protect our sacred site. It just flipped me right out.
So irrespective of whether COVID's conspiracy or not, there's something sick in the culture. The COVID's shown us that by the media's response. Like you say, they're in lockstep with the Andrews government or any totalitarian government throughout the world to say how wonderful it is. And they just spin anything to service this narrative that somehow the people in, T-shirts and shorts are the neo-Nazis, but the guys dressed like neo-Nazis are the good guys. I mean, it's perverted. And what opportunity does the Parliament present to make, to bring about a change in that circumstance?
So we can get up and talk about it and rail about it, and I think it has some small impacts within the government ranks and so on, but it never gets reported on. Our messages are rarely seen.
No.
So the government just ignore it, really.
Now
you're held hostage to the media as well. Sorry.
Let's just have a moment of silence as we try to figure out what Catherine's doing. Catherine?
Hello, Michael. Hello, everyone.
So she's staying anonymous, so we don't know who she is.
Like all politicians want to remain anonymous. I mean.
That's right.
That is so funny.
Catherine, did anyone go for your when you said you wanted to allow the politicians to be shot at in the gardens of the Parliament, that so they would know what it was like? Did anyone jump in for that? Did that come eventuate?
Tim would tell you what the reaction was in the chamber. What was it like, Tim?
I thought it was a brilliant idea.
So did we.
I think
So did we.
a lot of people laughed, so it did have an effect. People thought it was funny, but the chance of them actually doing it, no, it's never going to happen. But I actually thought it was a great idea. I think probably they should make every MP be shot at.
We knew a few people who wouldn't mind having a go. Yeah. I'm sure you guys did too.
Tim's speech the other night was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's interesting, Tim, that your speeches aren't being played on the mass media, but there's 2 medias now, and we're sharing the hell out of it. You know what I mean? There's and any way we can get it. It's the same with Catherine's. So it's real, and what we're sharing is common sense and decency and integrity, because that's what you're saying in your speeches. Just when your first speech that you came up that I shared, it was just like a breath of fresh air, because there's just been all this madness, and that's what I think is really confusing people, turning people against each other. There's I saw somebody, some guy the other day, some man told me the other day, they found out his daughter, 14-year-old daughter, wasn't vaccinated, and she had 400 loads of different hate mail through Instagram and all these things, just attacking her like some sort of, feral dog. It's extraordinary how we're turning on each other. And Dan seems to be the worst thing that I dislike him for. Is not I don't care about the pandemic. He's turning Melbournians against each other, families against each other, friends against each other, and now he's completely officially segregating us with this sort of state apartheid system, state-approved apartheid system, and I reckon it's just going to be devastating for the soul of this state for maybe years.
We're never going to. We will recover, I guess, but the damage is going to be economic damage. Will go on for years, and the scarring to the
spiritual
culture.
damage. The spiritual damage is really important too. Melbourne wasn't the most livable city just because everyone was wealthy and fat. It was done because it was just a great place. You go to a cafe, you hang out, you can be yourself. I remember watching a guy in Kew used to get on a tram dressed in a negligee. He had a bigger beard than us, and he's an old guy, and he just used to go in. No one gave a shit. It's Melbourne. Who cares? And then, sorry, Catherine.
Oh no, I was just going to say I went to the shrine on Sunday afternoon, and there are a lot of people who this pandemic actually they haven't felt it. Do you know what I mean? They've actually been okay throughout it. There is a lot of happy people still walking around, but there are a lot of other people who are just walking around extremely damaged. I seem to come across a mix of both, which is, I find that really extraordinary to see people who it's had no real effect to.
Well, if you have no kids and you have a nice comfortable job you can do while sitting at home with your laptop looking out the window, and you haven't lost any money, it's not that bad. I mean,
you've probably saved money because you don't have to commute. You've probably saved a lot of money. Yeah.
I have told people that. I actually even wonder about the city, where once it all comes back, are these offices in the city actually going to be used again, or is the city just going to be this dead duck sitting in the middle because the corporations realise it's better to work from home?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest concern, how it's actually going to come back. What can they actually do to get it to come back?
Something will come back, and if it's not offices, they'll turn some of them into apartments or something. I mean, the real estate won't go empty for long, but it won't be the same as it was. It'll be something new.
So the fabric of the culture has been irrevocably destroyed to some extent.
That's the real the actual culture I mean, okay, we'll make money. They always make money comes back, but who we were as a culture, all our everything that was good about us is what we seem to be losing. And when we were at the marches, that's what we were fighting for. That's what the young people were fighting for. Their basic freedoms, not some sort of deep philosophical freedom. They're talking basic back pocket freedoms. You know, the thing to, and they wanted it not for just themselves, but the young people we were sitting with, and these were the ones, like they said, they were Nazis, but we sat with young guys, we've had them on. They were sitting there collecting the rubbish and the cigarette butts into plastic garbage bags and putting it on the side with the police literally 2 meters away ready to come in and bounce on their heads. And they did that because they revered the shrine so much. I mean, this was everything that was good about Australia, and yet I've got this picture that I always post. So that was them. This is everything that's good about Australia down here, collecting the shrine, up against this future here. And you just wonder, how do we stop this future? How do you disarm that police force? How do you change that police force around to go back to being Wandon Valley and Blue Heelers? You know, because we seem to be heading down to the SS. You know, where they're coming in and arresting pregnant women at their home because they posted something on Facebook.
One of the things I said in my speech the other night was that this didn't start this year or last year. Premier didn't suddenly make the police force turn into what they are. This has been going on for years and probably more than a decade, this growing culture of impunity in the police, willingness to break laws. So I won't go into
no, that's fair enough.
to what extent police are involved in criminal activities or not, but the idea that they had the right to smash crowds and beat them up. We've seen it in protests over the last few years, and probably to my shame, I wasn't that when there was a protest against some conference back in 2019 in Sydney, and the police went and roughed all the protesters up, and I was going, oh well, they're just green hippie left wing protesters. It's not really good, right? The police would protest that, but I didn't jump up and down about it, and we should have been jumping up and down about it years ago when the police were doing this, because now they just built this whole culture of out of control policing, so I'm sorry I didn't speak up more earlier. But now
it's not the left wing. It's not the left wing they bring to heel, is it? Really, it's not the left.
Can I tell you?
Yeah, no, Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, just to say that when I first came into Parliament, I came into Parliament wanting more police because in the western suburbs we have, really bad police call-outs. So I actually went in there thinking there was not enough numbers, not enough equipment for the police. There mustn't be enough dibby vans because for call-outs for domestic violence or break-ins or anything to that effect, I had a lot of people complaining for the last 20 years that they weren't turning up when they were needed at their homes. So, but that still hasn't changed. Like throughout this pandemic, I've had the same complaints about they've called the police at their time of need at home, and the police haven't responded.
Well, they've been busy smashing heads in the city. There's,
I have to admit, I never had anything anti-police. Even now, I'm not even anti the police now. I think they're just, I don't know what's going wrong with them. I think that they have a real issue I think they've been given, I don't understand why they need all this anti-terrorist things. And if they do have this anti-terrorist group, why would you use it on peaceful young people and a few oldies protesting for freedom? You don't need it. I mean, we were in the city, Tim, when they turned up in this Bearcat, which apparently they're getting more of, and they're just jumping off in their SAS suits, all faced up, and firing on people without saying stop, without saying you're under arrest, anything, just opening fire. I mean, this is something you would expect in South Africa in an apartheid system where they were trying to quell something, some uprising from the black community. And it's insane. I mean, it was literally, and the people were just astounded, and yet the young people didn't go because they still wanted to vote for their freedoms. And we got to the shrine because we were allowed to. They had the numbers to block us, and they didn't. But the young people were like flabbergasted, like, what's going on? Why are they shooting at us? You know, if we were Black Lives Matter, they'd be getting down on their knees. But here, and that's what frightens us outside of Parliament. So in Parliament, you say it's just people going a bit crazy for power, and it's like they're digging a hole and they just can't, and instead of getting out of it, they're trying to dig deeper to get out of it. But outside, we just see a rise of a totalitarianistic state that seems to be censoring us on social media. It seems to be destroying the economy for small businesses, especially small business. And fear. I mean, a lot of people now walk around with a constant state of fear, whether their masks are on correct, whether they're going to get a massive fine, or just a sense that something is terribly, terribly wrong. And that's where we are right now as Melbournians, or some of us.
Michael, I would agree, Michael. People are scared that they're obeying the Chow directions, the Chief Health Officer directions. So yeah, they constantly. That's the only chat that you can actually have with somebody at the moment. When you come across them, how are you? And that's all they want to talk about is, the lockdown and the freedoms that they've actually lost.
It makes a mockery of the resourcing issue, doesn't it? Though, so not enough resources, but you realise, well, there's clearly plenty of resources.
Do you know of anywhere, Tim, in history where a society that gives freedoms away to a government gets them back gracefully?
Probably not. It tends to be a one-way street, and then there's a violent revolution. But there's very few societies that get the freedoms back easily. And even when they get them back, they tend to lose them again. So none of this can be good. I do think we've had 18 of the last 22 years of Labor government in Victoria, and there's been a real blurring of the separation of powers. Labor have pushed their people into the ranks of the bureaucracy, into the police force, into the judiciary, and so now you have this whole bunch of Labor supporters all the way through all the different arms of government who will support the government. And it's a real problem. The last time we saw something like this in Australia was in Joh Bjelke-Petersen, Queensland.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
The White Shoe Brigade. The White Shoe Brigade. Yeah.
So they the same place. The National Party infiltrated the police and the bureaucracy and all the rest. And there was no separation of powers. And this is what you get. It was easier to do in Queensland because they had no upper house, and so any government in Queensland is a complete power to itself with no checks and balances. But in Victoria, this term, at least our upper house hasn't been a check and balance either. It's been willing to vote with the government on pretty much everything. I described Dan the other day as Joh Bjelke-Petersen in a North Face jacket, but
a little bit sharper.
What we really need is a Fitzgerald Royal Commission, the thing that cleaned out the corruption in Queensland. We need some really wide-ranging, free-roaming Royal Commission to look into every level of government.
Who'd do it? Who'd be brave enough? Because the long march for the institutions, what you're talking about, and the institutions are all
Labor will never do it, and the Libs probably aren't smart enough to even kick it off. And there'd be a backlash against them if they did. But something's got to change.
What about our Prime Minister? I mean, he's silent as anything. He seems to be a nothing.
He's waiting for the polling to change before he changes his view. He's probably more driven by polls than Dan is. So I got no time at all. Scott?
Okay. Just before we go there, can we ask you, what did you think of the Hazard Court case? Because the judge seemed to be saying that you don't have a Bill of Rights, so your freedoms were an illusion. Is that we're waiting? We've got a lawyer associated with the site that we're going to get on and talk to him about it. But what's your view of it? Did you follow it at all?
Only a little bit. I do think that's the take that people have told me about it. And it's true in Australia, we have no Bill of Rights. There's no such thing as a God-given right or anything else. We have the rights that the governments choose to give us. It's always been that way here. It's just that people never thought the governments would take so many rights away. We thought, it couldn't happen in a parliamentary democracy. There be all these brave and noble members of parliament who'll stand up when the push comes to shove. But when the push actually came to shove, they wouldn't stand up.
Implied rights mean nothing. Yeah.
And Victoria, we have this Charter of Human Rights. They've just ignored it the whole time through.
Because that was a Labor initiative too, wasn't it? That was a Labor initiative, that Charter of Human Rights. Yeah.
Now, Catherine,
it was a talking point for them, but they tied their hands, and they don't want their hands tied, so it can be ignored.
Catherine, I got told to ask you a question. Is it true that you did vote to extend the 5 kilometre thing?
Maybe Tim could even explain that. That was a amendment. It was all for show for the Libs to act like they were actually doing something on the actual night. I didn't support the state of emergency. That was an amendment which the Chief Health Officer had already indicated that on the weekend that he was going to go to 25 kilometres or something to that effect. So I didn't support that amendment on the night because it wasn't the way it was all. They were playing politics. I was furious at 2 o'clock in the morning.
A lot of the votes in Parliament are all about virtue signalling. We puff up our feathers and say, look at me, I'm doing this, when it's not going to pass or whatever. So they're trying to, and we do it too. Every MP does it. You try to signal our position like a big peacock feather tail, even when it's not going to happen.
But then certainly need. I mean, the speeches that you two guys made this week and the other Liberal guy that got kicked out, I'm afraid these are important speeches because you need to know that there's some common sense and decency in the Parliament. At least someone's saying it, even if it doesn't resonate with these people because they're all trying to just figure out stay in power, the politicians. But if there's no one saying any of this, there's no hope. And that's what's happened for a long time. Until you guys started saying these speeches, outside we just felt lost. Like, what's going on? Where's our leaders? Everything's confusing. And it just gets crazier and crazier every day. We've got a saying on here that we said the other day that we Aussies used to say, she'll be right. But now we just say, what the fuck? And we say it like 3 or 4 times a day. Because you just constantly... I said, Catherine, apparently in New South Wales, if you want to go trick-and-treating, you're over 16, you got to take your vaccination passport with you. That's
really?
Yeah, it came out. It's
I listened to a bit of the grab of her today, and it sounded like a Bunnings ad. The first thing I heard was vaccinations at Bunnings, and I was like, what is this? She gave... No, it was ridiculous.
But it's like no one has the courage.
I think she must be Daniel Andrews' sister.
But no, the thing is, no one has the courage, will, or power to reform the bureaucracy. No one in any parliament in Australia. There's no one willing to reform the bureaucracy.
But look what happened in Perth.
I think it's been done in the past.
I think it has too.
Certain governments have actually come in and they've culled the public service. They've made it, because of budgets and cost.
They're only temporary setbacks, though. You cut back hard, but then it grows back to fill up all the space they had and keeps growing.
Yeah.
It's just
and then
it's the nature of government.
That's
if they have the
environment.
If the opportunity exists for government to raise money and to make rules, they will do those things and they will take more power. I've called it government is a cancer. When it's small, it's not so much a problem, but it just.
But it goes to Michael's point. Like, you feel unrepresented. I don't feel like there's anyone necessarily. Maybe you, Tim, or Catherine. There's a few small things like Neil Angus's speech. But it's like you feel unrepresented by your democracy. So there's no one there that speaks with my voice. And there's a lot of people. And it's actually not happening on the fringes. It's happening in the centre. So there's a radicalisation of the centre going on in the community, because who's going to look to Parliament for any solutions? Because even if you do, everyone's playing a political game. So the guy who gets up and says something I believe with gets in trouble with his leader because he's going against party lines. And in the meantime, how much are we going to have to suffer until the next election comes around?
Or they get kicked out of Parliament for not agreeing with the line, which is just, I find it extraordinary. I can't believe they did that.
Can I ask, when can you get back in?
So anytime we choose to show our vaccine passports, we'll be allowed straight back in. But otherwise, the motion is the second sitting day of February next year.
So February. So you're outside the Parliament now. Catherine's gone again. So you're outside the Parliament now. Just to finish this, we're a little bit over, but is there anything that the Victorian public can do to stop this bill, if Dan brings in a bill to actually go for permanent pandemic laws? Is there anything we can do, or is the Parliament just sewn up?
Well, with the three of us out with the upper house, the government only needs one vote to pass stuff, and they've got probably at least two reliable votes there. So
that's the point all the way. Yeah, the Greens will vote with them automatically.
Greens and Animal Justice as well.
Yeah. What about Reason? She probably will too, Fiona Patton.
Fiona may or may not
be scared off from last time.
But they don't need her. They don't need her.
They won't need her. So
us
being out will be an opportunity for her to walk away from it, saying, "Oh, I don't support it anymore." This is the
question we were asking earlier on. Yeah.
So it's just basically the animal liberationists and the Greens. And are the Greens really happy with what's going on? Do they have no issue?
Well, apparently, as far as you can tell from them, and it's probably because the real supporter base are mostly white middle-class public servants, rather than the ethnic minorities that they purport to fight for the social justice. And so when it comes to the crunch, they don't mind that the working class migrant population is the ones that are suffering the most, because their voter base isn't. But we've had plenty of, like I said before, a lot of party people come and join our party from the Greens who've seen through the nonsense they're talking about, and actually want individual rights, and someone will stand up for them.
And is Dan's militarised police force just a symptom of the radicalisation of the population? Like, to actually control this population now and to rule it, you need a militarised police force.
It's possible. I don't think it's really the case. I think it's just that once you
extremes
start
of COVID.
Yeah. I think things will calm down in the future, but I don't know. With the police force pushed away without radical reform, they are going to keep doing this to any sort of protest in the future.
Okay. Just to wrap it up then, so what are you going to do till February? I mean, it's extraordinary.
So we are going to go and stage a parliament in exile outside the parliament.
Wow.
We pushed through. It was pushed through a few weeks back, the ability for MPs to contribute remotely. They can't vote remotely, but they can speak on legislation and do the other parliamentary duties that we do. So our plan is to go there, sit down outside the parliament every day and every week we're sitting, do our things online when it's called for, and in general operate a parliament in exile outside the parliament.
You're going to have a tent or just seats?
We're working on that. Probably need a tent if it's going to rain, although that'll...
Like the Aboriginal embassy.
Make us a target.
The Aboriginal embassy at the...
like that. And we think, honestly, we can have more impact sitting outside the parliament and calling attention to what's going on than we could inside, because no one was listening to us inside.
Well, Tim, that'll be a sideshow, but the legislation will still pass through in the parliament. And really, honestly, since you're double vaxxed, wouldn't you think, just so that he didn't get an extension of the state of emergency, that you would actually go into the parliament and suck it up that you couldn't stand on principle just to stop? Because a more important issue is this Dan not getting an extension to this state of emergency.
We're very aware of the numbers and our responsibilities as MPs, and let's just wait and see week by week what happens. I'm not saying we would never go back in again, but at this moment, I think we have more impact outside.
Can I ask one more thing then, just before we finish? Do you think if the Liberal MPs were basically flooded with emails saying, do not vote for these pandemic laws, that they'd listen?
We were already being flooded with them.
Yep.
We get 100 emails a day.
I know you have, but I'm talking about the Liberals. Yeah, we share everything you do, but the actual Liberals that are going to vote for this, do you think any of them would even listen if they got a certain amount that would go, okay, maybe we shouldn't?
I think it's surprising.
Or they just lost.
Unlike if the Liberals vote for a further extension of state of emergency, they'll oppose it. But the trouble is, the government will find enough crossbenchers to push it through.
So the crossbenchers are it.
Crossbenchers are it.
Yeah, we've got to hit them up.
But
yeah.
For some crossbenchers, it doesn't matter how many emails they get; they're not going to pay attention. It's certainly
if they're worried for their job in the future, they might, isn't that?
Some will pay attention, but some won't. I've always thought that it's a useful thing, and I when I get 1,000 or 5,000 emails coming on a topic, I know there is a support there. I can, if I don't read every single one of them, I can weigh it up. Yeah, there's an actual weight of emails and public opinion there.
Well, what about your fear for democracy then, especially in Victoria, if he gets the bill through?
So I don't think Victoria is going to stage a coup and shut down elections altogether. They'll just keep eroding things away, change electoral laws to suit themselves, appoint commissioners to the Electoral Commission until it becomes ever more a one-party state. And it's just the Labor Party will keep being re-elected indefinitely.
You could stop the unvaxxed from voting, though, couldn't you? Because they'll be too much of a danger in the polling booth, surely.
Well, I don't think they'd do that, but who the hell knows?
They kicked you out of Parliament.
There's a lot of things I thought they wouldn't do that they've done.
Well, you didn't think they'd kick you out of Parliament, and they've done it. So anything goes when it comes to power. Mm-hmm. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Looks like this is where we are.
I do increasingly think Andrews might be a literal psychopath or sociopath, not with very little empathy at all. But it's just, I'm astounded by where we've gone in 18 months.
It's an exercise of power. It's an exercise.
We are all astounded. The world's astounded. The world is. The world is astounded. We get things on the show that people around the world are basically looking to us like people would look to people in North Korea. I mean, it's crazy, you know.
And it's deserved too. I might add. There's got these people saying, "Oh, these crazy foreigners don't understand what's happening here." No. Well, maybe they don't understand the details, but what's happening here, we don't understand what's happening here. The problem is the majority of the population are saying, "Oh, it's all good, it's all fine, it's just an emergency. Things will be better afterwards."
I was talking to a girl today who fled Soviet Russia. She understands what's happening here. Well, she certainly thinks she does. And she's seeing a lot of
people who contacted us. A lot of the people early on in the lockdowns were migrants who come here from totalitarian regimes, or their parents have come out to Australia. They knew what was happening. They were.
Well, what she said. She said to me. She said today, "You just weren't allowed to criticise the government."